It's tough being the talent, isn't it?
It just really is, and we don't get paid for it either.
No.
Terrible.
Coming up, we look at the quality of media pitches.
The Guardian buy their own online inventory.
And the global head of media at MasterCard calls on all brands to hire senior media executives. Hello and welcome to IDCOM's Media Snack, episode 46. So today we're going to just look back at some recent media pitches and review the quality of agency commitment so far.
Yes, we are. The Guardian have learnt something fascinating, I think, by buying their own online inventory.
Yeah, which is brilliant. And at Advertising Week in New York, Ben Jankowski, who's head of media at MasterCard, champions brands hiring senior media responsibles. All coming up on today's Media Snack in just the time it takes to eat a sandwich. Okay, so first up, let's talk about media pitches, because we've seen some really quite phenomenal work actually from agencies this year.
That's right, and we've worked on a number of reviews this year, but there were two key standout projects that we were involved in that had all of the agencies properly committed. And the work that came out of the media industry, I thought, in both of these projects was absolutely exceptional. To the point where the decisions at the very end of the review was very difficult for the clients to make.
Which should always be the ambition, right? When you launch a review, the ambition should be to make the final decision as hard as possible by motivating and inspiring agencies to do the best work.
But it stemmed from a clarity of vision on behalf of the clients. Both of these brands that we work with were going through a form of transformation internally. And that forced them to be very, very clear as to what their ambition for media is and what role they wanted any future media partner to play in that ambition. And therefore the narrative within the brief was very clear. They were very considered in the way that they were going to stress test the agencies as part of this process. And because of that clarity and that inspirational ambition, the agencies responded brilliantly.
When a brand has a really clear vision and ambition for media and is able to articulate that in the brief, you see a marked difference in the way and the quality of the agency responses. And I guess that's the thing. It's just the preparation and the ambition is key. And as we're talking about, next year is going to be a very busy pitch market in all likelihood. So that's encouraging, bodes well, but it also means that if you're in the process of planning or thinking about pitching, our advice is the quality of planning and preparation is critical, and the reason to have a very clear strategic ambition for your pitch is very compelling, because we see you get a far better quality response and level of commitment from the agency landscape.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more. And just on the back of your prediction that next year is going to be quite a busy year, and particularly in the US. So we saw this report that came out of the US that suggests that 64% of the US's media business will be put up for review in 2017.
So this was a piece of research published, I think it was last week in Ad Age, which was kind of caught our eye because it had interviewed a big proportion of the leading advertisers in the US. It was like 80-90% of the leading advertisers in the US. And they've been asked the likelihood of them to review their business in 2017. And 2/3 of them said that they were planning to do that in next year, which is, if you put that in the context of the scale of the US market, it's a $200 billion marketplace, right? So 60% of that means you've got $130 billion of pitching, if that's to be believed. And last year, which we called Media Palooza, Media Tsunami, was around 25 to 30 billion dollars, of which half of which was in the US. So this is getting on for 10 times the size.
So what would we call it then?
What's 10 times the size of Media Tsunami? If you've got any idea what you would call that, please let us know. I think somebody last year called it Pitchmageddon, so I just don't know how you go above that. If that research is true and provides any insight, then of course it indicates this is going to be a very, very busy market.
Yeah.
What's interesting about that? Well, it just means that if you're one of those brands that's pitching, how do you make your brief kind of stand out? How do you get access to the great quality of thinking, the great talent, and the great commitment from agencies when 60% of the market is pitching at the same time?
Yeah.
It's some kind of food for thought.
Absolutely. So next up, a fascinating story regarding The Guardian. So The Guardian's new chief revenue officer has conducted an experiment.
Yeah.
And they began to buy their own inventory.
Yeah.
And follow the chain through the kind of supply chain to see how much money they as a publisher got back from the investment they made as an advertiser, as a buyer.
Yeah.
And the results were terrifyingly staggering.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And it's an interesting exercise, isn't it, to kind of go out and buy your own inventory. If you suspect that there is potential loss in the supply chain, what they found was pretty damning. He said in the worst case scenarios, they were only actually seeing 30% of the money come back to them, which of course, if you can do the maths, is 70% of the ad spend, which should be going to the publisher, is actually getting sliced away by loads of kind of intermediary companies and suppliers, which is alarming, of course, if you're the publisher supposed to be getting access to, you'd hope, kind of more of that yield from your inventory. What does it mean for an advertiser perspective? It probably doesn't have a huge impact necessarily
but
on
as an advertiser,
what you get.
No, but as an advertiser, you'd want to know that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if there are multiple stakeholders in this supply chain all taking a little piece, it's fine, right, if they're adding value. But if they're not adding value, then why are they getting their little bit of action? I feel terribly sorry for the publishers, and that's obviously squeezing their turnover, and it's perhaps compounding the issues around ad blocking. But as an advertiser, I'd want to know what value all these little elements within the supply chain are adding to that process.
Yeah, and I think the FT did something similar a year or so ago, where they looked into how their inventory was being bought as well. So I mean, we'd encourage more and more publishers, more and more media vendors and owners to perhaps conduct similar tests, because it gives us some proper substantial evidence and insight where there's kind of speculation. There's a general feeling, of course, that the whole supply chain is just too complicated, and as you say, there's not enough clarity on the value being added by all these intermediary steps, and it has a profound impact on the ability of an organisation like The Guardian to continue to do the work that it does. So I mean, it has kind of bigger implications, if you want to take it that far, on quality of journalism and reporting and things like that, because a business like The Guardian is struggling financially, and you can understand why they are aggrieved to be losing all that income. So finally this week, the global head of media at MasterCard, Ben Jankowski, was at Advertising Week last week, and in some follow-up interviews, he was referencing the ANA's kind of media transparency reporting, and said some really interesting things. And bear in mind, Ben is one of those kind of global media leaders, very senior kind of global media leader, in the mold of the chief media officer that we've talked a lot about, and so has a kind of good perspective and good authority on this. He was very passionately advocating for other brands to hire senior media leaders, which we've talked about a lot, and the importance of that. It was good to hear, somebody else kind of, adding additional perspective to that. You've got to have that senior leadership to be able to have a vision and an ambition for media, of course, but you've got to not be fearful of this complexity and be able to help your company, help your brand navigate sensibly in this space.
I couldn't agree with Ben more, and we've been huge advocates of the chief media officer role, or encouraging brands to bring in senior experienced media resource internally to provide sound governance over what is an incredibly important critical discipline. And Ben's thoughts are completely reflective of those. But it does start with having that ambition. When you reframe the conversation away from purely the commercials and provide a very clear strategy for media, then suddenly you begin to identify the opportunities of it rather than be kind of fearful of the complexities, as we've talked about.
Yeah, exactly. And another thing that he raised again, which is very encouraging and good to hear, is this idea of if agencies are not paid fairly, then perhaps they'll be inclined to go and find other sources of income, which the ANA have said are non-transparent and undermining the trust in the relationship. And it's an ongoing kind of chicken and egg kind of discussion, isn't it? Because agencies say, well, if you don't pay us fairly, then you're kind of giving us license to go and do this.
That's right.
What Ben said was, how can we pay you fairly if we don't know what money you're making elsewhere? That's a tension that has to be broken.
Yes.
We have to, as an industry, kind of draw a line and figure out what we want from that, because pushing agency fees down creates this knock-on effect. These two things are kind of related. If you want a media agency entirely aligned with helping you deliver your business outcomes, then you don't do that by squeezing margins. What you do that by is by having a clear vision and ambition for media, and something which actually agencies can feel that they can share in. Okay? That is the basis of any relationship that requires trust, is to know that both parties are aligned to the same ambition.
Yes, and I think the solution is really, really simple. You draw a line in the sand. You pay your agencies fairly and equitably for the value that they provide to your business, and in return you expect complete transparency. I think it's as simple as that.
And interestingly, it's something I'm talking about. I'm in New York next week at an ANA event, actually, with a whole bunch of US marketers. And that's really the theme of what I'm talking about here, is to try and get us away from being intimidated by the complexity of media and excited by the opportunity, which we talked a bit about last week. And that actually only by having an ambition for media that you can articulate can you ever hope to have a trusting, productive relationship with your agency, because they have to have a vision that they can. You have to have a vision that they can share in.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more.
So I will feed back on that. We'll see how that goes. But good to hear other senior media leaders advocating these kind of changes in practice. Okay, that's all for this week. Please subscribe to the channel. Give us a thumbs up if you like what we're doing. Thank you very much for watching. Bye for now.
Have a good weekend.